I'll have an opportunity later to say a few more words, but I do want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity to introduce Senator Lankford, who working with Jackie Rosen. I'm also a synagogue president in Jerusalem. I know how much she suffered through that. After that, the Senate is easy. But it is a true honor to be able to be together on this platform with somebody who's not only a close friend, but somebody the more you get to know him, the more you appreciate the breadth of his experience, his contributions, his importance to the Jewish people, to America, to New York City, New York State, Eric Gertler, and you'll hear much more about him very shortly. We also have here many diplomats from Kurdistan, from Bosnia-Herzegovina. The ambassador of China has joined us, and we thank him for being here, from Israel and from other countries who come as well to celebrate American Jewish heritage. I know everybody in this room deserves an introduction, but one in particular I want to mention is Imam Mohammed Tawhidi, who is here from the Global Imam Council. And he is one of those who has spoken out since October 7th, and the members of the Imam Council for justice and right against the forces of evil, and we thank you for that. So the senator mentioned on ChatGPT, I put in and I said, what should I say about American Jewish Heritage Week? Well, it was started by President Bush in 2006. I said, it's a lie, it's not true, but it didn't answer me. But the truth is, in 1983, a woman named Judy Shapiro, who worked in the New York City public system and very active Jewish volunteer, came to me when I was head of the JCRC in New York and said there are heritage weeks for every ethnicity and every religious group except for the Jewish kids in the public school systems. And she is getting a tape of this. She is in a senior citizen home. She's well in her 90s. And I know how much she will appreciate being remembered because she carried the burden for many, many years of Jewish Heritage Week, and we finally got it to the attention of President Reagan in 1985. And you might remember the controversy about his visit to Bitburg when Elie Wiesel made that famous speech, "That place is not your place, Mr. President." That was the Jewish Heritage Week commemoration at the White House, and launched what was a very successful program across the United States. Then it sort of dissipated in the interim years, and then President Bush in 2006 did resurrect, and the annual commemorations, thanks to the members of Congress and the Senate who have helped perpetuate it and make it a regular institution in American Jewish life, in American life. Jackie Rosen made a mention about the importance of history. For us, history in the Jewish tradition is not about the past, it's about the future. We look back in order to look forward. We look back to the American Jewish heritage to learn the lessons, to spare future generations the trial and tribulations of our mistakes, and to learn from our successes. So this is a unique approach. We don't have a Hebrew word for history. We have zechirah, remembrance, which is a dynamic process where you have to understand what leads to things and what flows from them. Zechirah is the central theme in all the commemorations of this period. Holocaust Memorial Day is symbolized in one word, zachor. Yom HaZikaron, for those soldiers who fell in the defense of Israel and those who were the victims of terrorism. It's a central concept in Jewish life, and I think that is the motivation for the celebration of American Jewish Heritage Week in a year where you have seen a war against the Jewish people, against the Jewish nation, against Jewish history, and against the Jewish future. So this commemoration takes on even greater significance. One of those who has been most outspoken about anti-Semitism and leading this effort in the Senate together with Senator Rosen is Senator James Lankford, who has been in the Senate since 2015, and before that, 2 terms in the House. And we are really grateful for that leadership that he has demonstrated. He is an ordained Southern Baptist minister, and maybe out of that tradition motivates your commitment in this regard, both for justice and to fight hatred and bigotry. He serves on the Committee on Finance, Committee on Homeland Security, and he is a ranking member of the Subcommittee on Government Operations and Vice Chair of the Select Committee on Ethics. And he has become one of the leading voices, and as I said, the bipartisan task force for combating anti-Semitism. There's so much more we could say about him and his leadership on the legislation to fight anti-Semitism. There are students amongst us here who are the true heroes who should be recognized because they're Jewish students on the front line of the battle every day in universities across this country, and we salute you. And these legislative efforts are there to protect you as well as future generations, both of students and now of faculty as well. So, Senator, we're deeply grateful to you for all that you have done and will do, and the podium is yours.
Thank you. Malcolm, thank you very much. That's exceptionally kind of you. I'm going to make my comments brief. I see several of my colleagues that are still here as well that also want to be able to bid you greetings. Glad you're here. It's good to be able to get together and to be able to be together and to be able to celebrate heritage together. So I'm grateful that you're taking the time from wherever you're coming from all over this great country, or for several of you from around the world, to be able to recognize the significance of this time period, of this month, of this. That's important for us. It's important for this Capitol Hill to be able to see, but it's important for us to be able to engage as well together. It goes back a very long way. George Washington, as many of you know, had two favorite verses that he talked about often, and in many of his letters, he came back again and again to Psalm 34:18, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted, he saves those who are crushed in spirit. That was the most common verse that he wrote in every single letter. But the other verse that we sometimes lose track of is from Micah 4:4, which says, everyone will sit under their own vine and under their own fig tree, and no one will make them afraid. The Lord Almighty has spoken. That was the verse that George Washington wrote to the Hebrew synagogue in Newport, Rhode Island, when they wrote him and said, will Jews be welcome in this new country? He responded back to them with Micah 4:4. That it's still a legacy and a heritage that we have in the United States that we've got to continue to be able to maintain. For Jackie Rosen and I, when we started the Anti-Semitism Caucus and the conversation that we have begun in leaders around the world, with ambassadors around the world, with people in our own country, we continue to be able to raise this as an issue. She and I have talked often about what's happening on college campuses for the last several years, and quite frankly, we've had folks for several years say it's not that big a deal, it's not really happening, it's not really happening. Well, no one's saying that anymore, because we see what is happening on some of our university campuses. Not all, thankfully, but on some. And it will be up to many of us to be able to speak out on what is right and how we actually protect the rights of every single student and how we guard that right. So we've done that already. The House has passed the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. We have multiple other bills that are actually moving right now to be able to have this national dialogue, to be able to say, what are we going to do about this? And please tell me, it's not nothing. It's something that we need to engage. That's both donors and parents and families making choices about what places that their kids are going to go so that they know that they're going to a place where everyone is welcome. It's administration in every single campus stepping up and saying, we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure we protect the integrity of every single student of our campus, that every single student is both welcomed and encouraged, that we can have dialogue and disagreements, but no one's going to shout a student down and not allow them to go to class. No one's going to intimidate them in the hallways. The United States of America. That should not be who we are. The world stage should not look at American universities and say that's what they believe, because that's not who we are. And we got to continue to be able to speak out on that frequently and often. A month ago, I spent a week in Israel. I have to tell you, I've traveled back and forth often. Many of you travel back and forth often in all likelihood as well, but it was very, very different to be able to be there in April than other times that I've been there. I was in Kibbutz Nir Oz, walking through the streets that are empty with John. John, who's lived there for decades, turned me around and he took me to his house. And I will never forget the moment standing in front of his house that has just bullet holes all over the front of it. beautiful flowers that are blooming right outside, and him turning around and saying, "That's my son's house. He's currently a hostage somewhere a mile from here in Gaza." It's a moment I'll never forget, because it's a clarifying moment in a million ways, that for some reason the world seems to forget the hostages that are still in Gaza, why there's still a war that's ongoing, and why this is so important that we talk about anti-Semitism in our country and around the world, and never allow that kind of hateful dialogue to be able to rise. Because right now, John is praying for his son in Gaza to come home because of anti-Semitism in his backyard. So for all of us, thank you for gathering. Thank you for continuing to pray. And we mean it when we say, we're a nation together. And we're going to live those principles and those values that are foundational to our nation, and make sure that we spread those values worldwide, because the world needs to hear this kind of unity, and that we stand for the rights of all individuals and stand for the rights of Israel to be a Jewish nation and to be able to not just survive, but to thrive in the days ahead. God bless you.